What is up, fantasy people? You are back with the True North Fantasy Podcast. I'm Trav, hosting and West Coastin'. We're always brought to you by the Fantasy Points Media Group, where you can soak up the elite tools and analysis over at fantasypoints.com and score more in 2022. Our promo code is TrueNorth22, all caps, and that gets you 10% off your subscription. They got tons going on over at fantasypoints.com. They've got the NFL package, the college football package. They've got a data and research package on the way, as well as the newly launched PGA package. So there's tons of content for everybody over there, and it is the best deal in the business. It's just some of the most elite and analysts. It's people that we've had on the show, people that we've respected for years and loved, and we can't say enough about the work that they do, and it's been a great thing for us being a part of this. It's only their third NFL season being kind of in the game as a big site, and they're doing a fantastic job just getting started. So it's only up from here for Fantasy Points, and that promo code is TrueNorth22, all capitals, at fantasypoints.com for 10% off to score more this season. So it's going to be a good year for Fantasy Points. It's going to be a good year for True North as well. You can find us at truenorthffb.com, at truenorthffb on the socials. That is Twitter and Instagram, and just get connected with us. We really want to chat with the people. The TNFF network on YouTube is kind of the bread and butter of our content. All of our video content, which is the meat and potatoes, is on there. Make sure you subscribe. The Gold Jacket podcast is always jamming on Tuesdays at 7 Eastern, and then a couple hours after that, you'll find the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast. Those guys are a recent addition to the network, and we couldn't be happier to have them aboard. They've got a ton of shows, ton of people, ton of really good people on the team. Jacob Sanderson's doing a Cash Considerations best ball show on Saturday, which I just caught a couple days ago, and it was fantastic. So make sure you check all of our workout on the TNFF network on YouTube, and leave a comment. We love seeing what you think. We want to know what we can do better, and it's going to be a fun year, like I said. So ride with us, and you won't be sorry. So today I'm riding solo. Obviously, Ty and I have been mega busy on the real life end of things. Ty's started a new job where he has to get up at a god awfully early time in the morning, and then life is very busy. And we are actually moving. My family is moving in a couple weeks here, so things have just been super busy. Lots going on, so it's been tough to line up some time. But I'm gonna fire off on a solo epi, and tonight I am going to be talking about some high risk, high reward offenses in the NFL. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing with the players, kind of where the risk is at and where you can attack that risk, where you can lean in a little bit. And I might be citing some of the stuff that I've seen in some best ball drafts, because we are in full swing on Underdog Fantasy, and it has been a blast getting in there. They've got the Puppy Tournament and Best Ball Mania 3 going on, and I'm in a bunch of drafts, so hit us up on Twitter. Let us know what your teams are looking like. We'd love to see it. So the first team that I want to start with, I'm not going to waste any more time getting into it. The first team that I'm going to start with is the Pittsburgh Steelers. High risk, high reward offenses, and I think Pittsburgh is a fairly risky offense. Obviously, we know that they got a new quarterback situation coming in. That's the kind of the biggest thing, elephant in the room for the Steelers, so to speak, because I think around that quarterback, they have pretty much a Super Bowl caliber roster with that defense, the wide receivers. Freiermuth is coming into his own, and then Najee, and the offensive line is getting better. So lots of risk. Like I said, Najee Harris, he is, for me, he's probably one of the least risky players. Yes, he's going to be about a top 8 draft pick, or that's where he's going on Underdog drafts right now for the moment. But I think he's got the least risk, because sure, he has to pay that pick off, but we've been saying anytime that Najee comes up on the show that he has room to improve his efficiency as a runner. We know he had 94 targets, which was fat for the running back position, but I'll get there in a sec. As far as a runner, Najee was barely inside the top 40 in PFF's rushing grade. He was outside the top 30 in yards after contact per attempt, but he still did force a ton of missed tackles, which is encouraging. So if we could beef up some of that other stuff, he is going to make guys miss. And so he could have some big plays coming his way. His breakaway percentage, actually, which is percentage of yards gained on 15 plus yard runs, that was only 16%, which was outside the top 30 among running backs. So I think some big room to grow on that, because I think Najee can run away from guys if he's making them miss. And like I said, like for anybody drafting him, he's a top 10 pick, foundational piece of your roster. But the good thing about that is we know that the volume is coming his way. It can only either stay the same or decrease. Last year, as a rookie, Najee soaked up 307 rush attempts for the Steelers. Only 9 running backs had 300 plus carries in a season over the past 5 years, and Najee is one of those guys. So that's saying something that they loaded him up with that in his rookie season. And if you look at it a little bit deeper with the targets, only 13 running backs in that 5-year span have had 250 plus carries and 75 targets. So that's only 13 guys in the past 5 years. Najee Harris, one of those guys. So that is elite volume that we're seeing from him. We just need that bump in efficiency. So the trust is there from this offense. I think even with a volume dip for Najee Harris, we're still going to see him hit 250 carries. And I think the target floor for him is probably around 70 targets, which is something that only 4 running backs last year were able to hit. So I think that, just like I said, the usage is just so elite for Najee that I think he's going to pay that pick off. You see him going in, when you get him in the back half of the first round, I think that's a no-brainer, because this is a guy that could vault himself into that tier with those elite running backs like we've seen from Christian McCaffrey as of late. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor is the consensus 101. I haven't seen many drafts where he hasn't gone 101 on Underdog Fantasy. So Jonathan Taylor's up there. And I think the reason I say that for Najee is because you look at the guys that are around him. Sure, JT is young. He's looking healthy. He's looking good. That's fine. But then you've got Christian McCaffrey with the injury concerns. Austin Eckler, who until recently had never handled a heavy carry load. So we'll see what happens to him if he's doing that year over year. Derrick Henry coming back from that injury, obviously. He looks like he's going to be good to go, obviously, but those concerns are there. This is a big dude. If that body starts to break down, there's not going to be any stopping it. Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Swift, they have their own injury concerns as well, but elite upside. So I think Najee is in very close to that tier, and I think he'll cement himself after a solid 2022. And yeah, I just think it's a better offense for him, and I think that efficiency is going to come along with that. But looking at the pass catchers, it's a different story. We got a little bit of a different group here. Diontae Johnson obviously is the high-priced ticket item. He's going in the back of third rounds right now. He's the wide receiver 15 off the board or thereabouts. So he's on the fringes of top 12 prices. And I'm a huge Diontae believer, but I think there is some risk involved there. I have him ranked just a little bit higher at wide receiver 14. So it's not like I'm dogging him by any means. I just see that risk. He finished last year as the wide receiver 8, which is fantastic, but it'd be hard to say that Najee is going to be a top 10 wide receiver in 2022. It's just the uncertainty at quarterback, right? The past few years, he has operated in a heavily targeted role under Ben Roethlisberger. He had 169 nice targets last year. One of only 6 receivers with over 400 targets across the past 3 seasons. So much like Najee, the usage has been heavy. We just don't necessarily know that that's going to continue. We think that he's going to be first in the totem pole, but I think Chase Claypool is a guy who has been getting a little bit undervalued in drafts and kind of underseen by people. Like, people aren't talking a whole lot about Chase Claypool, but I think he is going to be a big piece of this offense. We also don't know if the inexperience at quarterback means a heavier reliance on the run game. I mean, I'm not sure how they can rely any heavier on the run game with Najee Harris. Maybe they get some of those backups in there, but you never really know what the offense is going to look like. We know that Trubisky and Pickett don't have that rapport that Big Ben had with Diontae Johnson. So maybe they do gravitate towards Chase Claypool. Maybe George Pickens, that shiny rookie receiver, is in there and maybe caps the volume for Diontae. So looking at how Diontae got his work too, Big Ben wasn't throwing deep very much for the Steelers, but Diontae did get 28 deep targets last year, one fewer than Mike Evans. If I'm looking at this offense, I don't see Diontae as the deep target. I see Chase Claypool or even George Pickens coming in and taking some of those deep targets away from him. And so I think like some of that lucrative work that Diontae was getting might not be there quite as much this season. I just don't see that being in his profile. I see him being more of that super versatile route runner who takes the ball and gets some yards after the catch and stuff. But we will definitely see. In looking at his outlook for 2022, I think best case Ontario is probably that top 15 finish. I can't say confidently he's going to be top 12 or top 10. I wouldn't plant that flag as of yet. Another thing in looking just at roster construction, I don't love him being the number one wideout on my team with that uncertainty. I'm usually going to be going with a guy who has that top 5 upside. So in the first 2 rounds or so, I am probably going to be taking at least one wide receiver that has that top 5 upside, because I think you can kind of supplement the running back position. And then if you can add Diontae Johnson as the wide receiver 2 on your roster, I think you are laughing, because there is a world where he still comes out with 150 plus targets. So I think it could be a little bumpy with the inconsistency of the young quarterbacks and Trubisky if he gets some starts, but I just think the price is just a little bit too high for Diontae. I have drafted him in certain spots to diversify, but I do find myself wishing that there was a little bit of an echelon higher at that draft price where I have to take him. So in Dynasty, he's totally fine. Pickett is going to be a good quarterback, a good distributor down the stretch. I don't think he's like a huge mobility guy. He's going to run the ball from time to time, but he's not going to be a guy where his running is a focal point or it takes away from any other piece of that offense. But to look at some of these other guys here, if we're looking at George Pickens, I think he was a really nice pick for the Steelers, but I don't really expect a huge impact for him in year 1. Maybe late season, I could see him being one of those guys who gives you some spike weeks late in the season. So I am stacking him when I do get Diontae Johnson, because I think he could take over some of those deep targets, as well as if there is a war of attrition with some injury, which we've seen before, then George Pickens could come in and take over more of that Diontae role, which is a pretty heavily targeted role, even if we see that volume coming down, So I think George Pickens is a good late dart throw, but I wouldn't be expecting especially early season production from him. So not super huge on Pickens for 2022, but he's a rookie. So get him in Dynasty and you're going to be laughing, because the Steelers are an absolute wide receiver factory, and they just churn them out like nobody's business. Another guy they've churned out in the last couple of years is Chase Claypool, fellow BC boy living just across the pond. Well, he's from Abbotsford, just across the pond. I don't necessarily know where he lives right now, but it's pretty cool to see a guy from the same province in Canada as us as a wide receiver in the NFL, and we root for him here on the True North Fantasy Pod. Doesn't look like underdog drafters have been rooting for him that heavily, though, because he's going in like the wide receiver 45 to 50 range. I put this show together probably about 3 to 4 days ago, so that could have fluctuated just a little bit. That's why I give a range. But within the last week or so, he was wide receiver 52 on underdog drafts. So that to me just seems like stealing, because we've seen him put up big weeks before. He can win you weeks on a week-to-week basis, and on a seasonal basis. I think his best finish has been wide receiver 23 as a rookie, and I think he could eclipse that with a big year if this offense is efficient. I'm not planting my flag that he's going to finish ahead of that, but I think top 36 is pretty much a lock for Chase Claypool, because he's going to be coming in and he's going to be taking that second fiddle on the target totem pole. Obviously, as a rookie, he scored 9 touchdowns, and it's hard to say that he's going to repeat that, but I think he's going to see an incremental increase as far as target volume, and, probably maybe some more deep targets. He's probably going to have a lot more upside as far as the yardage that he puts up week to week. So Chase Claypool, man, I think he's one of the best values you can get at wide receiver. You got to really see those guys who can give you that upside when you're drafting later in those drafts in like the double-digit rounds. And this is a guy that can get you those 10 touchdowns any given season. He's got that profile. We saw him against the Eagles one year. He got 4 touchdowns, and I think 2 of them were run-in on reverses near the goal line. So if they can work some of that stuff in, I think he gets you some of those easy points. And this is a guy that I think could perform kind of close to Diontae Johnson, if I'm being honest here. So I think he's somebody that I'm going to be attacking a lot, and he's somebody that you're getting as a wide receiver 4 or 5 that can be used as a wide receiver 3 on your team. I have him almost 20 spots higher than his ADP. He's my wide receiver 35 right now, so I'm pretty bullish on old Chase Claypool, but I think that range of outcomes, like I said, could be high as a top 20 season. So smash him at that cost, get him on your team. You're going to be reaping the benefits of some Chase Claypool. That's for sure. So I do just want to give some love to Underdog. I've been kind of talking about them a little bit as far as where I've been seeing some people go and some ADPs that I've been seeing. And it's been so fun drafting on there. Our promo code with Underdog is TNFF, and that will get you an instant deposit of up to $100 on your first deposit. So you drop $100 in there, they're going to give you another $100, and you can get into puppy drafts for as little as $5. So you spend $5, you get in there, you have fun drafting. And the beauty of best ball, there's no in-season management. You don't have to do nothing. You draft and you forget about it. I got about 20 drafts under my belt already. It's going to be a little higher as we get towards the season. I'm not going to be one of those triple digit degens like some people we know, but much respect to those guys because that's a fair bit of cheddar to be thrown down on the drafts, but I've seen some of the ROI that these guys get at the end of the season, and it's pretty incredible. So not only is it a fair bit of cheddar, it's a fair bit of fun to be had. So get into Underdog, promo code TNF at your first deposit. That really, really helps out the show and the brand. We appreciate anybody who's done that, and show us your rosters. Give us a screenshot on Twitter. Let us know what you're thinking about some of these drafts. Let's interact about it. It's been really fun to promote and make Twitter content about it, but we really want to see what the people are doing and figure out how it's going for everyone. So look for some draft live streams coming up in the near future here. It's going to be fun to get on there and let you guys see how we're picking, how we're running through our picks, what our rationale is for who we're taking. And I can't say enough for how much fun it's been. The platform is squeaky clean. They've got an app that is just dialed in, so easy to use. You can upload your own rankings on the site. It's a quality product over at Underdog Fantasy. So get in there today and you will not regret it. The next team I'm going to talk about, guys, it's my Philadelphia Eagles, and it's weird to talk about them because I'm ever the optimist, but I'm also very pessimistic about the Eagles. So sometimes I feel like I'm being a homer talking about them. Shout out to BZ and D Brown, always chirping me for being that Eagles homer. And I'll own it. I love the Birds, and I don't mind having them on my fantasy teams. And I think it's going to be a good year to have them on your fantasy team. There is a little bit of risk. Obviously, that's why I'm doing this show. Jalen Hurts is kind of the crux of that risk. Does he make a leap as a passer? We know he's going to be great independently for fantasy because of that rushing upside that he presents, but can he make the leap as a passer? And the trickle down from that is holding up these weapons in Devonta Smith, the rookie drafted at 10 overall last year, and AJ Brown added in the draft. I was jumping for joy when AJ Brown was added in the draft. I cannot believe that they picked him up. They got the 18th overall pick, which was Treylon Burks, and a third-round pick, and I cannot recall who that is, but I think that was a steal for AJ Brown, who's one of the elite wide receivers. The Eagles are a team who are going for it. The NFC East is always got some holes in it. Dallas is the main team to compete with. The other teams are looking a little chippy as well, but I think Dallas and Philly are the front runners, and Philly really needed to go for it. AJ Brown's that guy. He is that guy. You want to add that stud to the young quarterback. You are going to see what Jalen Hurts has this year, make or break. And I hope he makes it, obviously. AJ Brown, though, Devonta Smith, both risky players because of that passing volume and the rushing that Jalen Hurts presents in kind of taking away from some of that passing volume. So we don't know if they're going to be good as a whole wide receiver core. We don't know if one of them is going to be good and one of them is going to be bad. We're going to get into that in a second. Miles Sanders in the run game, he is stinky cheap. He's like an 8th round pick, and he is the starting running back on a team that was the most run heavy in the NFL last year. Obviously, he's had his ups and downs, but I think he's still a great player and a great fit for this offense. I don't know if him being that cheap is for good reason, or because I think he's presenting a pretty good value, especially for those teams where you wait on running back. Maybe you get one running back in the first 6 or 7 rounds. You get Miles Sanders late 7th, and you're laughing as a running back too, because I think he's going to give you some spike weeks, and I think you can supplement a little bit later with guys maybe who have that heavy carry volume, maybe not as much pass catching, but the guys who can give you some of those weeks to supplement what Miles Sanders might drop off from week to week. You got to start at the top, though. We have to start with Jalen Hurts. Obviously, huge upgrade for him in A.J. Brown from a real football standpoint. I don't know if it's necessarily a huge move for him from a fantasy upside perspective. Like, I don't think he really individually poses much risk because Jalen Hurts is going to rush for 800 yards. Last year, he ran for 10 touchdowns. So he's always going to be an attractive fantasy piece at the quarterback position because of that rushing work. So I think the hate on him being a mediocre to bad passer is maybe a little bit misplaced. We knew coming in that part of his game wasn't going to be as polished coming into the NFL. And now I think the biggest factor is just to let him cook, almost like the Russell Wilson situation. We need to see that passing volume go up from Nick Sirianni and the coaching staff. I said they ran the ball the most in the league last year. They threw the ball the least of any team last year. And it was just a crazy season where they dipped so low in volume versus the Carson Wentz seasons. It was kind of weird for us Eagles fans to see. Obviously, he ran in those 10 rushing touchdowns, which was fantastic. His legs are just a huge part of the fantasy value, and he's probably the juiciest piece to dive into on this offense, if the least risky, right? So if you look at what he did, more than a third of his rush attempts last season were not on designed runs. They were scrambles on designed passing plays. So I think that is encouraging for the passing volume, where Jalen Hurts was off schedule because maybe he didn't see a guy open, which has been a perpetual problem for these Eagles wide receivers. But I think those players are ready to kind of transcend that and come out of that moniker that they've gained by being a bad wide receiver core. And I think Smitty and AJB are going to be kind of at the front of that. So yeah, I just think, like, if we see that passing volume increase, what does that do, right? That definitely would decrease some of the volume for the running backs. I don't think the running backs are going to be super heavily involved in the passing game. I think if they are, it's going to be very spread out targets with maybe Miles Sanders leading the charge, but don't sleep on Kenneth Gainwell. That's for sure. I want to stick with the pass catchers first, though, because they are obviously so tied to this passing game that we have questions about. A.J. Brown, obviously he's the man. I think he's a top 5 talent wide receiver in the league, but am I willing to take him at his current draft price? I'm not so sure. Some people kind of look at his situation in Philly and they liken it to the old situation in Tennessee, but I don't think those two things are quite the same, because Ryan Tannehill is not on Jalen Hurts' level as a runner. Yes, the Titans' passing volume was low, but we don't see Ryan Tannehill just taking it and running all the time. So I think Ryan Tannehill was more inclined to throw the ball to A.J. Brown. He also had very little competition in Tennessee. Julio Jones was there last year, but he was there basically. He was injured most of the time, didn't pose much of a threat. And in Philadelphia, he's got a top 10 pick in Devonta Smith to compete with him. I don't think I put Devonta Smith on A.J. Brown's talent level as of yet, but Devonta Smith has that one extra year of chemistry with Jalen Hurts, one extra year to get into this playbook with Nick Sirianni. And like I said, that draft capital is fat for Smitty. So I think they're going to give him every chance to succeed in the NFL. They've also got Dallas Goedert, who he's looking to break into that top 5 of tight ends. I'm a little bit worried about his volume, but I think you have to see him as the last of that tier that can get that for you, because behind him you're seeing Dawson Knox, you're seeing Pat Freiermuth, and I just don't think those guys necessarily present the upside that Dallas Goedert does. I'm fading Dawson Knox pretty heavily this year. I don't know if he's going to be quite as involved. Maybe a little bit of lightning in the bottle in 2021 for him. So I think Dallas Goedert is kind of the last of that second to third tier of tight ends, depending on how you have those top 3 guys with Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, and then Kyle Pitts, or top 4, I guess. Depends how you have those guys, and then Dallas Goedert can kind of slot into the back of that next tier. But Devonta Smith, I'm not necessarily fully on him this year, which makes me kind of sad. Wouldn't really be trying to take a flyer on Quez or Zach Pascal. I could see Zach Pascal being kind of that pesky guy who gets random 10 target games and the other guys don't get targeted very heavily. I think he's going to be more of an annoyance to the other guys as opposed to an asset that you want on your fantasy team. But if somebody gets injured, you could always try and dive in there. Pascal's not bad to put on the bottom of a deep bench because he was brought over to the Eagles. Nick Sirianni has some history from his days with the Colts and Zach Pascal. So I think there could be a little something there, but I don't think he's going to be a priority on the pecking order there. So the Eagles offense is a really, really tough one to attack. A.J. Brown, we're looking at him in like the late second, early third. And I think I like some guys around him better. Like if you look at Mike Evans, give me Mike Evans this season over AJ Brown, just because Tom Brady is back. Chris Godwin's hurt for the first probably month or so of the season, and Russell Gage is the next wide receiver up. So not a ton of competition early season for Mike Evans, and we know that guy's just 1,000-yard season, potentially 10 touchdown factory. So AJ Brown, just to me, he's kind of a bottom of a tier where I'm liking to attack the other guys better. Smitty, I mean, he's going as like the wide receiver 36, so I think you can definitely dive in on him. I don't know exactly what draft round that is right now, but I would probably go in on him for the outcome where he is much closer to AJ Brown than we anticipate. And I'm not saying closer to AJ Brown as in he's wide receiver 15 and AJ Brown's wide receiver 9. I'm saying closer as in Smitty's wide receiver 22 and AJ Brown's wide receiver 16 or something like that, you know? So I think Smitty can return on those prices, because I think that's going to stay low unless we see this team just lighting it up through camp and people are getting really hyped. So keep an eye on that. But I think right now he's probably the best value, even if he's a little bit risky, because the risk is mitigated by the price. So tough one to dive into, but I think you can definitely lean in certain areas, and we could see some upside. I just think like it might not necessarily be consistency from all of these guys from week to week. I think we might just see 2 guys produce one week, 2 guys produce the next week, maybe 1 guy produces the next week because Jalen Hurts has a big rushing week. So it's going to be a little sporadic, but I think the big weeks are going to be really nice for us for sure. Talked a bit about the running backs. Really tough running back or running game to attach to. Miles Sanders, Kenneth Gainwell, and Boston Scott are the top 3 on that depth chart. Old man Jordan Howard is still lurking on the team as well, but obviously he's probably not going to be a factor. Last year as a team, the Eagles running backs combined for 7 top 12 weeks and 13 top 24 weeks over the season. So nothing to necessarily write home about, but it's probably more than I would have thought if I was to just take a stab at it off the top of my dome. So there was some consistent running back production in Philly. There was just no way to pinpoint who it was going to be. Kenneth Gainwell had 3 top 12 weeks. Boston Scott and Miles Sanders each had 2. So it was very, very spread out among these guys, and they really liked rotating some of the guys in for certain purposes. And I think it was kind of effective that way from a real football standpoint. We look at Jalen Hurts' 10 touchdowns that he took to the house is a big problem for these running backs. It's he's going to sap some of that, especially if they're calling passing plays down near the goal line and he doesn't see anybody. He's running that in 9 times out of 10 or throwing it out the back of the end zone. That does nothing for the running backs. So, I mean, if you look at Miles Sanders, I do like the value for the upside as that 7th, 8th round pick, because like I said with Smitty, that cost isn't super high if you've got a team where you kind of neglected the running back position early. But if I hammered running back early and I've got 3 studs, I'm probably not going to take Miles Sanders in the 7th round. I'm going to be looking at the wide receiver position or start to look at my quarterbacks and tight ends if I haven't taken one yet at that point. So Miles Sanders is good on those teams with less running backs. But if you look at guys around Miles Sanders, he's right behind Elijah Mitchell and A.J. Dillon, taking both those guys over him. A.J. Dillon's a little bit closer, but Elijah Mitchell definitely. Miles Sanders is going ahead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Cordarrelle Patterson. So you see there that there's a bit of a teardrop where Miles Sanders is. And I think that's kind of why I might be going in on him, because I don't want to fall to that next tier in certain drafts. So I don't mind that cost on him. I wouldn't really be going in on the other guys. If anybody, it's going to be Kenneth Gainwell for the possibility that he gets 6 to 10 carries, but mainly is getting 6 targets per game. That's what we want out of him. But yeah, I mean, tough to dive into that offense, the running game, but I think you can with Miles Sanders. And if you need a deep stash, it's got to be Gainwell over Boston Scott. And that's reflected in their ADP, which wasn't necessarily the case last year because Boston Scott was getting lots of love as the Eagles running back too. The last team on the docket that I'm going to talk about tonight, going to be a little bit of a shorty, but I really appreciate everybody sticking around with me and hanging out, are the Baltimore Ravens. Going back to the AFC North, talked about the Steelers before. Let's go to their bitter rivals, the Baltimore Ravens. Why are they risky? Lamar Jackson obviously just came back from that big injury. Tyler Huntley finished out the season for the Baltimore Ravens, and Lamar's season was a little bit sporadic. Looking at the running game, JK Dobbins, he had that big injury last year, but I think he was a bit of an off-season winner with them not going heavily into the running back position in the draft. They drafted Tyler Batty late. I don't mind him as like a 4th round rookie draft pick just for investing in this run game. but they also have Mike Davis and Gus Edwards still lurking back there, and they've been trusty vets in the past, so I could see them being that. And that's kind of the mold that Baltimore's been going by, is get a couple of cheap veterans in there who can take some carries, and they've been effective and efficient because you plunk a guy into this offense. It's Ty's old Jackson 5 rule. Lamar Jackson in the backfield equals 5 yards per carry, no doubt. I don't know if that holds true after this past year. Actually, you can't quote me on that, but we're rolling with it. Looking at the pass catchers, they traded Marquise Hollywood Brown to the Arizona Cardinals, and I thought that was a really good deal for both sides. We know that Baltimore likes to stock up on picks for guys who they know they're not going to necessarily re-sign, and then Arizona needed somebody with that DeAndre Hopkins injury. They were obviously wanting to beef up the wide receiver core as they're going for it in the NFC themselves. So Arizona, I think, got a really good deal with Hollywood because they kind of needed that. Rapport with Kyler is there for him. And I think it was the 20th or the 23rd overall pick that they basically traded for him. I think there was another third or a fourth in there or something like that. But Hollywood Brown for the 23rd overall pick is totally, totally good, especially a couple years into his career where he's got some seasoning and some polish into his game. He had 140 plus targets last year with Baltimore. So I think he can handle that workload, and I think the ceiling is going to be higher in this Arizona offense for Hollywood. But little tangent on the Arizona Cardinals, Rashad Bateman is the winner of that trade. He is the wide receiver 1. I kind of always saw him ascending to that role just because he's got that bigger body to sustain in this kind of punch you in the mouth rushing offense. So I wonder what the ceiling is for Rashad Bateman, but we're going to get into that in a couple of minutes. We look at Lamar Jackson. He's come back to earth the past couple of the seasons, to an extent. Obviously, he still has that mega rushing upside. But what I like for him is the tea leaves that I've been reading this offseason. Trading Hollywood Brown says to me, and putting Rashad Bateman into that number 1 spot, kind of says to me that they do want to get back to more of that smash mouth running game. And I think Lamar Jackson is the centerpiece of all of that. He's got that 1,200 yard rushing upside every single season. And I think those tea leaves are telling me that that's what they want to do, right? And he has room to grow in a big way as far as red zone rushing work, rushing touchdowns as well. I think that could be in the cards for him a little bit more this year, as maybe they try to disguise a little bit around the goal line with Lamar. And I think him running the ball in is going to be a part of that. And I think we're going to see some really good touchdown numbers from him in the rushing department this season. But obviously the passing department is what we have big questions about. They don't throw the ball very much, and he has been much more inconsistent since that MVP season that he had. I think that was kind of the perfect storm for him, and what we wanted was him to find a middle ground in between that and, say, the low passing volume, low yardage that he had the season before. So I think he can find that, right? I don't think he's going to be throwing for 5,000 yards by any means, but I think he could get into that 3,500, 4,000 range. And if he can have an efficient touchdown season where he puts up 25 and doesn't throw 15 interceptions, I think that is enough to uphold him being the quarterback 1 overall potential quarterback that we want him to be, right? I think he's just always got that. I've got him right now as my quarterback 3 on the season, which is a little bit higher than most, but I've seen people draft him as that. So I'm not the only one who thinks that way. I think the storm is coming, and it's not centered on the passing work at all. He's a guy that you need the rushing work to go bananas in order for him to have that, and I just think that's going to be the case this season. So I'm investing in Lamar Jackson in that, like, he's pretty much in the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen tier. He might be a sniff under, but I'd put him above Kyler Murray. I'd put him above Joe Burrow. I don't have my rankings pulled up, but I do have him as the quarterback 3 right now, and I think he's going to pay that off. So I think you can get him in that 5th round, and you're laughing because those other guys are going in the 3rd round, and you don't have to pay that price for a quarterback who has the same upside, if not more, to be completely honest with you. So I think it's going to be a good year for Lamar, and I'm heavily attacking him as my quarterback 1 in a lot of leagues. I'll probably have him in a lot of my redraft leagues because I think the home leagues are going to be kind of a little bit out on him just from that injury that he had last season and the inconsistent play, and I'm just going to take advantage of that. Just wetting the whistle with a little bit of water. It is immensely hot in here, I just want to say to anybody who's listening. So if I look glistening, if I'm glistening right now, A, I'm just gleaming naturally, and B, it's hot as fuck in here. So that's what we're dealing with here in the True North Fantasy lair, but we love it nonetheless. getting back into the Baltimore Ravens, they are going to recommit to the run game, if you ask me. And a lot of that is going to be heaped onto JK Dobbins, one of my favorite buys in Dynasty right now, and basically for all time, because I've always loved JK, the Dob Goblin Dobbins. I think he should be on a lot of my teams this season, and I think he should be on a lot of yours. That volume is maybe a little bit questionable with Mike Davis and Gus Edwards, but they're going to have tons of rushing volume to go around. And this isn't one of those guys who's going to need to give you 270 carries to have a nice little pop season. And it's all about the expectations, right? I'm not expecting a top 5 season from JK Dobbins at the running back position, but I think back end top 12 is definitely within his range of outcomes, just for the fact that the touchdown upside is there. He's going to present a lot of explosiveness, hopefully coming off that injury. That's the big caveat, obviously, but I think being super young, that injury happened really early before the season even started. I think JK is going to come back strong. And I think he's somebody like you're getting him at pick like 55 to 60 right now in underdog fantasy drafts. And I think that's an absolute smash. You're in the 5th round. Maybe you got 1 running back on your roster at this point, maybe even 2. If you want to go running back heavy, JK Dobbins is the guy to be your running back 3. And then if he's your running back 2, you know that he has double-digit touchdown upside. Could catch 20 to 30 passes in this offense. Who knows? Maybe they morph it a little bit. I think that would only benefit JK Dobbins to get the running backs more involved, because I think he'd be the guy over Gus, Mike Davis, and Tyler Batty. But those are guys that I'm diving into a little bit depending on the price as well. Gus Edwards, super cheap. Mike Davis, you usually don't even see him drafted. So if you got a deep bench, toss him on there, because JK Dobbins coming off that injury, if anything happens again, the running back 1 for the Baltimore Ravens offers you high upside potential, probably almost 20 carries a week if there's somebody that they're going to feature that heavily. I don't see them doing that with JK Dobbins. I could see them giving that carry share to like a Gus Edwards or a Mike Davis if Dobbins went down. But I think Dobbins, you're going to see him in that 15 carry per week range. And I think he's just got some explosiveness to pop off on that and give us some big touchdowns and big weeks. So I love him in a best ball setting, and I'm totally hammering him in my redraft as well, because I just love JK Dobbins. I can't say it enough. The passing weapons, though, like this is a passing offense that we've previously been hesitant to kind of dive into. Mark Andrews is an elite tight end. He showed that last year as the tight end 1, but I think we got to be a little bit careful with getting him in there with that Travis Kelce, Kyle Pitts tier, because I think we could see maybe a little bit of a volume dip for Mark Andrews, which might not seem the case with Marquise Brown being out of the fold. Marquise Brown last year, 140 plus targets. So that's a lot of vacated volume. For whatever you take of that, there's a lot of vacated volume. And I think sometimes in these lower volume passing offenses, maybe you can take a little bit more from the vacated volume, just because sometimes the volume can't get that much lower, right? So if there's 140 plus targets going around on a team that's going to pass the ball 530 times, they're not going to just throw the ball 100 times fewer. Like that is like an extremely low amount. So I just think that like we can take a little bit from the fact that Hollywood Brown is leaving those 140 plus targets behind. It's not necessarily something that I could see siphoning 100% to Rashad Bateman, or Mark Andrews is going to maintain that 120 plus targets that he had. I think it could be spread out a little bit, but I think Bateman is obviously the bigger beneficiary. He's nowhere near explosive as Hollywood Brown was. He has way less week winning potential, with probably less spike weeks than Hollywood had with that big playability, but it's not like Hollywood was really blowing the doors off of this B last year with those target numbers. Hollywood last year had 146 targets, 91 receptions for 1,008 yards and 6 touchdowns. It's not like otherworldly, so Bateman could easily eclipse that. And I think you can dive into him as the wide receiver 3 on your roster. Don't really trust him as the wide receiver 2 on my team. I think that's really tough to buy into, just because if your wide receiver 1 goes down, you still want one of those guys who has top 12 upside. And I wouldn't say that's necessarily in the cards for Rashad Bateman this season, but I think, top 24 definitely could be there for him. So I like to get him as the wide receiver 3 on my team, so I can reap a little bit of the benefits of that cost, right? Mark Andrews is my tight end 5 this year. He's, I just think that volume's going to come down a little bit. I don't think he's going to have quite that efficiency. I don't know necessarily that he doesn't compete with in a lot of the same areas that Bateman might compete, right? So I think those two guys could potentially eat into each other, making Mark Andrews a little bit pricey for my liking. And that's not to say that I don't like him, because if anybody knows or watched the show when he was coming out, he was one of my favorite tight ends in the draft process, been one of my favorite tight ends in the league, and still is. I just think for fantasy, and honestly, like, he's a top 5 tight end, and he's one of those few guys that you can rely on at that position. So I'm not hating on anybody going after Mark Andrews. It's just not a price that I'm going for. I'm probably waiting for like a Dalton Schultz at that point, a couple rounds later. Even, if I'm going to punt fully, I love David Njoku this year. Hunter Henry's a little bit intriguing for some of that touchdown upside as well. So there's some guys to be had. Even a little bit deeper, Hayden Hurst with Cincinnati. That's a high-powered passing offense that we want pieces of. Hayden Hurst is basically free 99. Not saying I like those guys to reach the numbers that Mark Andrews does, just saying I will sacrifice that extra production that Mark Andrews is going to give me for the cheaper cost of some of these other guys at a dumpy position where you just kind of need replacement level production to get by with stronger other positions, because I didn't draft Mark Andrews at the end of the second round or the middle of the second round. I took that wide receiver that's going to give me a huge season, not guaranteed, but more likely than Mark Andrews sustaining the production that he had in 2021. So I'm definitely into the Baltimore offense, more Bateman and Dobbins and Jackson than I am Mark Andrews. You got Devin Duvernay there. I don't even recall who the other guys in the fold in Baltimore are, so that kind of tells you something there. But I wouldn't be investing in those guys. The volume's just not enough to rely on, right? So I just think that in Baltimore, you got to go with the guys at the top of the totem pole, and that would be Bateman, JK Dobbins, and Lamar Jackson. And if you want to invest in Mark Andrews, you think he's going to sustain that 2021 production, then fly at her. That's totally fine. The other wide receivers on the team for Baltimore are James Proche and Tylan Wallace. So a bunch of second-year guys on that team. I think all but Devin Duvernay are second year or third year. So it's a young group, but I think it's a group that can grow along with Lamar Jackson. We would really like to see them throw the ball a little bit more. So those are the high risk, high reward offenses I wanted to talk to you about tonight. It's been fun to get back in the lab, get the mic in my face, talk into it a little bit, dig into some fantasy football. Really appreciate anyone sticking around. Again, TrueNorthFFB.com is where you can find all of our work. TrueNorthFFB on the socials. I'm hitting Instagram a little bit more, so give us a follow on there. It's been a lot of fun. I like the platform. I like how you make content for Instagram, so check it out on there. A couple little videos, couple graphics. It's been a lot of fun. But the main priority is to subscribe to the TNFF network. That's where you're watching this. And that's where you can watch all the shows in the network. And let me tell you, the content is stepping up for 2022. There's going to be a ton of stuff to get you ready for all formats as we approach the season. And we can't wait to be along for the ride. Big thanks to Underdog Fantasy. That promo code is TNFF. We're having tons of fun on there doing drafts. Appreciate them. We got Trophy Smack as well that I haven't mentioned on the show. Love them. Level up your league. Get some hardware. Promo code there is TNFF as well, and that gets you a free championship ring to go along with that purchased belt or trophy. So buy a belt or a trophy, and you get that free championship ring. And they got tons of other stuff on there. That place is just booming right now. They moved into a new headquarters, so follow them on the socials. They're doing tons of great work over there at Trophy Smack. And then, of course, the Fantasy Points Media Group. Ben, the director of operations there, is a saint. Such a great guy and such a great team. Graham Barfield and Scott Barrett on 2 bars. Wes Huber is kind of the jack of all trades, who is just elite when he gets on the mic and when he gets fired up about something. There's nothing like when Wes Huber gets fired up on something. I love that. And Joe Dolan doing amazing work. Him and Tom Brawley have great shows together. And it's just been a fun ride with the Fantasy Points team. John Hansen is, right at the top of that as the fantasy guru, one of the industry goats. So it is very, very cool for us to be connected to them. We are very proud of that, and we couldn't say enough about the other brands in the Fantasy Points Media Group. So True North 22 with all capitals of True North is 10% off on that Fantasy Points subscription for 2022. Really appreciate that. That is the best way to support the show, is to go and support our sponsors, because they support us. So thanks for sticking around. Until next time, peace.